Outreach and Engagement Committee, it sort of went dormant a little bit. But as we reported at the last board meeting, there's some exciting news that we're hoping to get everybody sort of buy-in to try to go ahead and moving forward with. So we put an agenda together that I think we can abbreviate if we want to, just out of respect for everybody's time. But one of the main things I wanted to do as taking over the new chairmanship is give everybody an opportunity, obviously, to sort of reset expectations for this public outreach, and engagement committee, and make sure we have a pretty clear understanding of what you guys would like to try to achieve with this. And then some of the exciting news that we have and some of the grant funding opportunities that are provided for us, hopefully are going to accelerate things. So obviously, before we start accelerating, I want to check in with you guys and make sure that you guys are comfortable with the work that's been done to date and that we honor a lot of the work that you guys did as a committee leading up until this time. So, I'm from the private sector, so I have a sort of a DNA to try to move quickly, but I want to make sure that I don't miss the opportunity to catch what you guys would most like to accomplish. And that's why we wanted to make sure we had a sort of an organizational or reorganizational committee meeting today. So the agenda was to try to just check in with sort of our strategic plan and do what I just talked about a little bit and make sure we know we're swimming in the direction you guys are hoping for. Then talk a little bit more about this community foundation grant that we talked about at the last board meeting. And then make sure at the end we sort of talk about, this committee's role and responsibilities and some other things that we need to sort of put in place going forward. So I'll maybe just pause and ask you, Frank, from an aspect of regrouping, coming out of the strategic plan, being part of the community outreach committee, is there anything, we haven't met in 6 months because of COVID. Is there any sort of, burning questions or thoughts about sort of what we want this committee to be doing or things out of the strategic plan that you want to sort of make sure we have on this agenda? Maybe I'll just let you go first. You might be muted still.
You think he's unmuted?
No, not yet.
Might need to push your microphone button until the red X goes away.
I heard you before, Frank, so.
Oh, I think he's on the camera.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Frank, thank you very much.
Good. Well, listen, I just want to say this for fellows who've been around a little while. I am extremely proud of the fact that we are putting this into place because if some of you may remember, I used to talk about the general public has no idea about what we do. And we've been working on this for a couple of years now. So all I just want to say that I am extremely proud of where we have come from. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going in the right direction. And, at each juncture, each year, we should improve. My whole idea, and I think still the concept of the group, is we want to make sure that the public knows who we are and what our expectations are, and that we can share that information with them. So I'm on board with all that. I think that's where the goals have been put in place. So that's all that I need to really mention.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. And it's sort of, I like to go back to strategic plans and foundational reasons for why do we exist. I like to sort of start every meeting with that. It's sort of my style, but it's also out of deference and respect for all the time that you've put in this organization too. Chris, is there any opening perspective, sort of stemming all the way back from the strategic plan to sort of where we are now with outreach and awareness you want to talk about?
He's unmuted.
Chris, if you're there, you might be muted. I hope we didn't lose Chris.
Nope, I'm back.
Cool. See that private pause is strategic.
I kicked out and I'm back in.
You're breaking up a little bit.
What I heard of Frank's comments, I agreed with, and I'm especially proud of the work that's been done on our social media and website. And I think we're making great strides in communicating how the public communicates today. And so that's a big deal for everybody. And in terms of being able to describe what it is we do, I think it's part and parcel to that. So I'm honored to be on this committee and honored to continue to work with Frank and each of you to make the very best of this subcommittee and this organization as we continue to move forward and telling the public what it is that we do here.
Got it. Let me ask you each a question to think about. So one of the conversations that Martha and I have had through the years is there's some interesting parallels between Timmons Group, who's a consultant, and PlanRVA, which is a consultant for the whole region. And I think there's some healthy conversations to have about maybe things that we've learned that we might be able to deploy. When you say we and what this organization is doing is the thing you would want the public to know, being top of mind about the work that the organization is doing, the people that are employed by the organization, or the board members that guide the strategic plan and guide and fund the organization. Which one of those three, or which two of those three, are maybe your top priorities? Frank, you want to go first?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm of the opinion, because it's always have been my prodding over the years, for the public to know what it is that this organization and sister organizations, what they do. So I think that we have probably been a little, how should I say this, that the public, I guess I just believe in the principle when the public is most informed, they can make the best decisions. So sometimes in the past, they did not know there was such a thing as the PDC and all these things there. But with what we've put in place today, we're going to have more transparency. And I think that's the key. We want to keep it simple, but let the public know what it is that we do. And just like our name, our name and our mission and some other good things that you have done, how individual elected officials could put information on, and not only just about the organization itself, but what they're doing in their respective localities. So here again, I say I think we're going in the right direction. And as far as the strategic plan is, I don't see how we can miss. I don't see how we can miss it. I feel good about everything.
All right, good. Chris, any thought on that particular question?
And I apologize that you went in and out while you were asking it. Could you ask it again, please, for me?
Yeah, so just looking for maybe a slightly different perspective is as we reach and try to, figure out how to best get awareness, is awareness for the work that PlanRVA does most important, awareness for the staff and the organization itself most important, or awareness of the board members and who's on the board most important?
Oh God. I mean, I think it's number one by, really. I mean, honestly, you could put different people on this board. That's not it. We're not here to stroke ourselves. I mean, this is about doing the public's business. So I think that needs to be at the discussion on any of this, to be honest.
Okay, you broke in and out a little bit, but I think I got the gist of that. You're mostly about the work.
Yeah, about 99.9%. Yep.
Got it. Well, I appreciate you guys allowing me to ask that question because I really think the next part in our agenda, this Community Foundation grant, is an awesome opportunity that Martha and her team have lined up for us to amplify everything that you guys have already talked about. I just want to make sure we're planning to amplify the right things. And so I think that's where sort of this committee where we can sort of get into maybe how we measure that after we sort of get a summary of really a reminder of what the Community Foundation grant is. So I guess maybe the best thing to do would be to turn that over to you and give a quick summary of that.
Yes, thanks, Tim. We included in the packet the letter of request that we submitted to the Community Foundation, thinking that that was hopefully a nice foundation to be able to articulate the intention that we have. Just to kind of level set, we applied for and were awarded a $50,000 grant, 50, from the Community Foundation. It is an unrestricted grant that is in process actually to be payable to us as we speak. The dollars sit with us and we use it as however we see fit to be able to make that, make this possible. And we submit a report at the end of the fiscal year and at the end of June to be able to report on that. But this is unique to other funding streams that we typically have where it's on reimbursement basis and is, what I would refer to as more of a prescriptive grant. So there is, I think, quite a bit of flexibility in how we proceed. I have a general sketch of what I think we could do, but as Tim and Sid and I have prepared for this meeting, we felt like this is a really big opportunity to get the committee involved and engaged in really steering this effort. So I think, not for lack of effort, the Planning District Commission, vis-a-vis when it was RRPDC or when we go by PlanRVA, has always had the intention and the desire of public input, but I'm not sure that we've always implemented the right strategies to be able to get large scale public engagement in our work. I think, to a member of staff, we all believe that public input is important and is pretty critical to the planning process. However, like most things, when you have an under-resourced objective, it doesn't always get met. And so this capacity building grant, from my perspective, is really an opportunity to be able to build an engagement strategy, a guide and a roadmap for us to be able to implement. But on the other side of the use of this $50,000, really I think the hope is that the commitment will be there, from dedication of staff resources to ongoing support from this committee to be able to really make sure that we are doing what we say we want to do and that we're measuring our success in those areas. So I won't read the letter to you, but the intention was to be able to use this grant to be able to hire professional support through one or more engagements. And I think, to be honest, I had envisioned this as being a multiple firm sort of team approach to engagement, where we would be able to get guidance from professionals in the space of marketing, public outreach, engagement, to help us build that strategy and to think about what an implementation plan would look like. So the product in essence is a set of strategies and actions, and then an actual implementation plan. What kind of resources will it take to be able to execute this on an ongoing basis? I think that we have the opportunity to go back to the Community Foundation in the 2021 funding cycle to support some of that implementation work. I will also say that we are starting to incorporate public outreach and engagement activities as a more discrete item and deliverable within our grant applications that we're writing. So, the thought is that if we are able to use this $50,000 grant as the basis for forming that overall agency-wide strategy, then the funding streams that we already receive could be utilized in a way that would really be able to move them forward in the respective grant programs. I think now more than ever, our organization has leaned into the use of technology in ways that we have never before. The last 7 months of operating and transition that we've been through have really, I think, stretched our imaginations to be able to think differently about how we can engage with the public. Mr. Winslow, you mentioned, some social media and some things like that. We were moving in that direction, but I think have definitely, accelerated a lot of those activities. We've gone a long way in improving our web presence, but there are other ways that we need to be engaging with the public, and I think that this is a tremendously important time in our region to be able to take meaningful steps to engage with community members who have historically not participated in the planning process. For our staff, that means thinking differently about public engagement, not just about what compels Martha to get involved in her community, but what compels people that Martha has never met, and neighborhoods that are not traditionally served by the infrastructure that we support, or that are transportation disadvantaged communities, or those that are most vulnerable to the impacts of weather and other natural disasters. I think we're really trying to become much more focused on reaching the members of the community that stand to benefit the most from some of the planning work that we do, or are at risk of being left out of the planning process because of a variety of different factors. So in part, I think that this is an opportunity for our staff to stretch a little bit in how we think about our communication style, the mode that we communicate. I think we've already identified that voluminous documents and technical language is not the best way to communicate to busy people who are focused on other things. But it's also really important that we think about language. Not everyone in our community speaks English or speaks and reads English at a level of proficiency that we often write and communicate, whether that's on social media or the website or in documents. So we've been exploring media like story maps and other visualization strategies. We've been trying to think through how we could incorporate the receipt of input differently so that we can start to get into the community, and maybe last year was the first time we really did sort of this kind of, we participated in the Parklet program. Sid, help me, what was that called? The city's.
Venture Richmond's Parklet program?
Yeah.
Venture Richmond.
So we set up a Parklet that was focused on transportation, and we're able to meet community members as they were going on and off of the Capitol Trail. And I think that's much more, the conversation I hear among our staff members is much more focused on meeting people where they are instead of having people always be forced to come to us. And so really kind of changing our orientation in that regard. Thinking about public engagement as a more continuous activity that's ongoing and iterative, as opposed to framing it as a 30-day public comment window that's very, kind of one directional with, jargon and people needing to navigate and meet timelines in order for their input to be heard. So that's, I'm probably kind of going a little bit off target, but that's the hopefully a helpful description of sort of the vision of what we want to do. The question is how.
Right.
And what role I think does the committee play forward? You, as members of the committee, have been really helpful to us in brainstorming strategies and really specific actions that we can take. But I think we're trying to kind of pull all those disparate pieces together and have it be, all those different little efforts rowing at the same time, so that there's a cadence and a movement that's going all in the same direction, instead of probably pulling in multiple directions at any given time and not really seeing the fruits of those efforts. So I'll stop there for a second, and Tim will probably need to pull me back onto the track.
But that's great. It's a great summary, and it's sort of a great evolution of a thought that, in my observation, we were doing as a committee that was investing time and had a bunch of different ideas from a bunch of different perspectives. And I think what we're looking for now is to take it out of committee being the talent, to be in the committee being the board, and this consulting team that we bring on board to be the talent. Because we don't want to be doing things that worked for organizations like us 2 years ago, or things that you had a perspective on and I had a perspective on. We want to be an organization that's being led by an outreach strategy that's going to get us to where we want to be in 5 years.
Right.
Because this grant opportunity that you provided could be ongoing for multiple years going forward. So I guess that's really the next open discussion, Frank and Chris, is are we ready? Are we comfortable for this evolution of this sort of committee putting out an RFP, selecting multiple potential teammates that would come in and start organizing our strategy and proposing a strategy, and us sort of be on the receiving end of that, instead of us being the ones who have to sit around the table and brainstorm and come up with all those strategies. And if so, then the next question really is, how will we define that success 2 years from now, 5 years from now, to make sure that we are meeting this committee's expectations when we pick the consultant from day one. So first question to you, Frank, I mean, are you comfortable that maybe your role as someone who's being asked to brainstorm and come up with the ideas can transition into someone sitting back and evaluating consultants on how well they can help us get to that strategic place? Are you comfortable with that approach?
I think you're muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
Okay, you hear me now, I think.
Yeah,
Yes.
we can. Thank you.
Right. One of the things I think that I like to think about before we get to the specifics too is always remember, what is our raison d'etre? So when Martha was giving an overview of what this is all about, one of the things we need to remember is that what we are putting in place can bring about something that we have a challenge anyway. And one of those things is not just that the public may not know who we are, but small counties versus large counties. And what this can do is be an equalizer as far as information flow. So one of the tools that if we thought it was an efficacious thing to do would be to use, for example, a town meeting. Town meetings, officials can do things on their level where they feel comfortable, and they can bring the public in, and we can do so many things that are, I think, advantageous for what it is that we're trying to do. And that's very, very simply to get out information so that we are not the only ones who are privy to this information. And so those will be my comments about it. I think that whatever will be a part of our strategic plan, I think we're going in the right direction.
Okay.
And I have no problem supporting, these features there. But I did want to mention, we have to always remember what is our raison d'etre.
And so you're okay with one of our next steps being to solicit proposals from private sector consultants that can help us take the next steps?
Well, don't forget, we're not the same region that we were a year ago. So things have changed. And so I think what we got to do now is believe in being a progressive region. And this is what a subcommittees like this have to do.
Okay.
So I think we're under mandate to go for those types of grants that will help us grow. Particularly when we talk about it, and I think you mentioned this, that we're not talking about for ourselves, because some of us will be going later on, but we put down that foundation for the future. So when people say they come into District 15, they come into our district, our area, they say, man, this is where the happenings are taking place. And that depends on our foundation that we put in place. And this is part of that foundation.
And we're going, one more just follow-up, Frank. So we're leaning towards an outsourced model for a little while, in the fact that we're looking to bring on a team of consultants that will be for the next 12 months, approximately 1 year. So I'm always careful, because my observation on the board has always been we're very frugal and we're very careful with our money. So if the next step is that we've got the $50,000 grant and we're going to spend it on consultants with your input and Chris's input and everybody out who those consultants are, you're okay to launch this strategy that we're outsourcing approximately $50,000 worth of services?
Well, I think one of the factors here that we must consider is sometimes when we do things like this internally, we don't really recognize who we really are. And sometimes it takes I don't like this term so much, but it takes outside groups to kind of come in and give us a vision of what our vision really is. As some people say philosophically, we never see ourselves anyway. We see reflections of that. So I think, again, this is putting part of that foundation in place so that it'll last, it'll weather the storm, and we'll make some mistakes maybe, but we also will make progress. So
Good.
I don't have any problem in going in this direction for this feature. We just need to be careful in the future. You just said the funding would be some of these say the outside group will give an analysis of what we are all about or what we could do. Then we could come back home perhaps.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Martha's brought up that idea that if we lay the foundation with outside consultants and it makes common sense for us to hire more staff later down the road, absolutely, that could be one of the courses that we take. So I just want to make sure that this committee is okay with the next steps, because the next steps will be visible because we'll be reaching out to consultants outside of PlanRVA ourselves. So
Well, I won't speak for anyone else, but for myself. But I go back to something I reiterated a few moments ago. Sometimes we think we are doing something, but maybe this outside group is going to say, well, you haven't actually been doing that. You haven't actually been articulating that. And here are some guidelines to do it better. And so that's why I'm thinking we are going in the right direction.
good. Chris, let me ask you that same question because I think it's important for us to make sure we're all on the same page. If we go the outsource model to sort of take the next steps and lay in the foundation, are you okay with that?
Yes, what I would say is I think anytime we, particularly in this body and knowing who we have around the table and how we grip on the money tighter than, a lot of people, I think and that's probably for good reason because it's tax dollars for a large amount of it. So, but I would say I think it's important for us to define what we're looking for in a way that is short term, maybe middle term and long term. What do we think we're going to get out of the project? I mean, I think a lot of detail if we were doing an RFP, for instance, and all the things that we would go about, putting in there, what exactly are we looking for? Are we looking for long-term brand recognition? Yes. Are we looking for a greater recognition of what this organization does, not only in our individual counties and cities, but in the region? Yes. Are we looking for interesting and maybe other ways that we haven't thought about engaging the public previously that are easy things to do, and not require a lot of commitment on behalf of busy people? Yes. And so, but I would want to, see that spelled out in such a way as to give, 90% of the people looking at it comfort. This is, a good direction to go in. And so, the answer is yes, but I think it's important how it's pitched, if that makes sense.
That was fantastic. I mean, I can picture an RFP that just said a lot of what you just articulated, because I do think, that's what we're really looking. Those are the measurable impacts that we're looking for. And we're going to count on a team of consultants to get us from where we are to where we need to be. So I love what you just said. And then as a committee, and we bring a team of consultants on board, instead of us being the brainstormers who are coming up both with the strategy and the tactics, are you comfortable with your role would be more the one who's receiving the ideas and vetting the ideas more so than coming up with the ideas? Are you all right with that sort of inverting that role?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that as Frank suggested, there are times when it's good to go outside and it gives you a different perspective. And so to the extent that we have others who are willing to give us that input, obviously for a fee, but willing to do that, who have been down this road before and who understand some of these issues this organization faces. Yeah, I think it's absolutely, we only can improve ourselves most of the time. Now, obviously not every report is helpful, and we've all been we've all been there when we've maybe farmed out some work and gotten a report back and said, is this all we got for the money? And so I would just urge caution and prudence about who is selected to do the work. Make certain that, they've provided value to their clients in the past, and that we can, view that to the extent that that's available to view. And just make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's on this.
Good. Well, right before you said the word value, that's the word I wrote down as well, because that's what we're looking for. For every taxpayer dollar we spend, we want to make sure we're getting value.
That's right.
And then that goes, I guess, into a couple of the tactics of how we get to sort of the RFP process. And Martha, I'm not sure if you've sort of given a lot of thought yet to those specifics, but it would feel to me that it would maybe be staff's responsibility to draft the RFP with some of the expectations like Chris just talked about and Frank articulated a little bit. Get this committee to review it and feel comfortable with the RFP, both the process, the firms we're going to reach out to, and the metrics that we're going to ask them the value we're going to ask them to provide. And then our role as a committee would be to vet and comment on that. What's the time frame, Martha, for your goal to have, I guess I'll say first a consultant on board and then work our way backwards to an RFP on the street?
Yeah, I'd really love to be able to have this work with the consultant team up and running by around the first of the calendar year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think this conversation today is really helpful. If we met again in November and the committee felt comfortable with the draft, with obviously with comments incorporated and everything, if we released it, in November, we could I think turn around a nice timeline for the RFP to be out for qualified proposals to come in, and we'd be able to get the team under contract by around the first of the year. It might be the first couple weeks in January, something like that. But and then that would give us, I think, candidly speaking, I mean, a couple of months to be able to let them, get to know us, sort of get their feet wet, meet with the committee, whatever that interaction would look like in the spring months. And then as we really round out the end of winter and into spring, be able to start evaluating at least a set of preliminary recommendations for how we would be approaching, whether it's a grant opportunity that we'll want to write to be able to implement certain things, or just planning for next fiscal year. I think it feeds really nicely into the fiscal year 2022 process for planning.
So that means we may be in a situation, this is a question then, Frank, for you and Chris, to see if it sounds okay. You guys would hope staff would be drafting this maybe in the next couple of weeks, because that'll get us to the end of October. We circulate that draft for comments, and then maybe get this committee back together to merge all of our comments, get any questions asked sometime maybe 3 weeks from now, something like that.
Yes.
Right after, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I think.
So Frank, you're okay with that? That'll be our next step. Next step will be staff drafting an RFP that will circulate, and then we'll just need you to put your eyes on it and send back any comments. You all right with that as the next step?
There you go. Yeah, there we go.
That was a good idea.
All right.
Yeah,
Good.
I
We're trying to be respectful of your time, Frank, and appreciate you hanging in with us, but that's, I think, a logical next step, and then we can be efficient, by circulating some information. And obviously, we want to touch base with the other committee members and have an abbreviated conversation like this to make sure that'll give me a couple weeks to do that as well. So Chris, you okay with that as the next step, is you'll be seeing a draft RFP, might be the next step as you as a committee member for you to comment on?
Yes, I would. And I would also say that if it's okay, I'll probably have Susan Pollard in communications and media take a look at it as well to see if she has thoughts, if there's no objection from anybody on this committee.
Not at all, and we will probably be reaching out to her as well.
Okay.
And the first, so I should have said this, and I think it's another opportunity. In addition to this committee forming, we also established an advisory group, I'll call them, that is the PIO, Public Information Officers and Communicators from each of the jurisdictions around the region. So we lean on them throughout the year, really, to be able to get their advice and some guidance on ideas that we're kicking around. And so they have been a helpful group to us. Susan being the rep from Chesterfield, Will from Henrico. There's a person designated from each of the jurisdictions that have been really helpful, and I would love for them to continue to kind of play a role as we think about moving forward.
Absolutely. That's a resource I wasn't even aware you guys are engaged with, so
Sorry,
that's
I'm
great.
saying that.
So, good. So the closing statement that I'll make, Frank and Chris, as I thank you guys for the work that you've done before, up until the point on this committee, is sort of an evolution that we went through at Timmons Group, where it used to be that what we did as consultants is we took, the engineers that were the best with numbers, and we sort of asked them to be our CFO, and our engineers that were the best with computers, we asked them to be our CIO, and the engineer that bullshitted the best, we just made them our marketing director and asked them to be involved in outreach and marketing and advertising.
How'd that work out?
Well, speaking as the engineer that was supposed to be the best bullshitter, it didn't work out all that well. And the light bulb went off when our president went out and hired a professional marketing person who understood engineering. And our HR person used to work at UCrops, and she understood HR. And our CFO is from Capital One. I mean, it's amazing the light bulb that went off on the marketing and the public outreach when a professional marketing person took over bullshitting for Timmons Group instead of having me do it. And so I think in this case too, that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for a light bulb to go off and say, no, that's not what you want to be doing. And 5 years from now, this is what you want to achieve. These are the things that you ought to be doing, and challenge us to go ahead and do that. So that's, to me, very honestly, why I called Martha and volunteered to try to impart my expertise on this committee, is because I think there's an interesting parallel that we can draw from and hopefully get a lot of traction with your guys' support. So, and I want to make sure Larry knows and Christian knows and Anne Marie knows, how much we appreciate all their work so far as well. So I'll try to have a similar conversation with them to make sure nobody feels like they're getting left out in a process of us going and spending this money on consultants. So anything else, Frank, you want to impart before we close? You get him?
We can't hear him, he's talking, but
Is
he's.
he? No,
I think he's still on mute.
yeah, unfortunately, we're not hearing you, Frank.
Mr. Thornton, your sound is not coming through, you're still muted.
now can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so who are the members of the public that's part of our subcommittee?
That's a great question.
Great.
Right now, the committee only is membered by members of the board. And yeah, what do you, tell us more, what you think?
Well, my concern is is one of our objectives is to reach the public.
Yeah.
And it just seems that we would need someone from the public as a part of our group to help us with our planning and give us ideas.
Come on, Frank. You're the public. I'm the public. We're all the public.
It's a really great idea, Frank, and maybe that would be something we should ask our consulting team. You know, is make sure that we ask, as we're interviewing them to try to find the right fit, how is it that an organization like this involves the public from the very, very beginning, not 6 months down the road? It's a great question.
At the risk of sounding like I'm ahead of things, because that's not that's not the reality, but we have been thinking a lot about that, and how do you do like an intentional outreach process that doesn't feel like it's at or to people, but it's with them. And so I do have a call set up later this week with with a number of different people that have kind of been a little bit farther on this journey of public engagement. And so I'd be happy to share any learnings that I get from some of those inquiries to be able to see how they've sequenced things so that it's not a waste of folks' time.
Yep.
But doesn't get so far down the process that it missed some really fundamental pieces that needed to be there.
Yep. Yeah. I think for maybe the next steps, Frank, we're going to have to make sure that our committee members represent the public's best interest until we can get maybe a better answer to that question. So that's good. We'll keep researching it. Good.
Don't forget our name, right?
Correct.
We're called Public Outreach and Engagement.
Nope, I love that challenge, and I think as you sort of go from being the brainstormer to the person holding us accountable for a strategy and a plan, you got to keep asking that question, Frank. So, Chris, how about you? Any other closing comment?
You know, I'm sitting here trying to think through like who would want to be, not to denigrate our committee here, because it is wonderful. We got good people, but I'm just trying to think who would be in the member, as a member of the public interested in coming and being a part of this. And, I know we have transparency organizations out there that sometimes opine on things. But I don't know that that's a good fit. Really, I think we just need to engage people who are interested in marketing. And, ordinarily I would be all about, let's bring everybody in, but I'm not sure. I'd rather have members of the public help us with the evaluative product that these professionals put together. If we had a focus group come in and say, you know what, these people missed the boat on XYZ, or this looks good, or what have you, this is how we could tweak that. I kind of think that input at that time would be most valuable, at least from where I sit. And not to sound like a snob. I grew up in a trailer park in Gloucester County, so I don't want anybody to think, oh, this Chris is out there trying to think he knows everything, because I don't. But I'm just trying to think of what value we're going to get and when we're going to get it in this process.
Would smaller groups that are part of the public that do voluntary work and similar to work that we do, whether it's in transportation, environment, emergency management, like they're outside from any agency or anything, they're just a starter group or some sort of group that's formed that's tackling this, but then be having them as having their input on a board meeting like this, maybe that could be an input that could be valuable, possibly just because they're already surrounding themselves with people in work that we're also doing for the region as well too.
I think, without knowing an answer to your question, I think that thought process is good. I do know that we've, as a consulting company, we've engaged beta testers with different technology applications that we've created. And the beta testers were a great way for a broader audience to sort of feel engaged. Before decisions were made, they were their challenge in their one technology application we did was their job was to try to break the technology. So that may be another way for us to think about that is this transparency is important to this organization. It's foundational for us. They may not be able to be at the strategic table, but they absolutely are at the table as soon as we're ready to engage with the public about. So I do think this board, that's a healthy balance that Frank's sort of thrown out for us, a challenge.
Mhm.
So I have a person who's opposing one of my projects in another jurisdiction in western part of Virginia. I might be able to recruit that person over here, and then that way I can take them away from opposing my project. That way.
Well, the other thing I will throw out is that, and we do have a little bit of that representation in Tim
Right.
and in Anne Marie, but we have citizen appointees from a number of our member jurisdictions who serve on the board.
Yep.
And it might be beneficial to,
Recruit them
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
for that perspective.
Anne Marie is an interesting opportunity because her professional, her day job is marketing.
Yep.
But she is a citizen appointee, and the other citizen appointees, might be beneficial folks, even if they can't serve on the committee, maybe they'd be willing to
Yep.
brainstorm with us, and
Good.
something
Well-
led them presumably to want to take this appointment.
Yep.
So.
Well, we will continue to ask that question, and when I have kind of the conversation with Larry, Anne Marie, and Kristen, just to update her, I'll make sure I bring up that question. And if everybody's comfortable for us to draft an RFP, get the RFP conversation going, and at least get that process moving to try to meet Martha's schedule, then obviously we will continue to ask that question about where and how do we engage the public. So from the very beginning. All right. Chris,
If
go ahead.
if I could just say, I will take this opportunity to just say that, at the exciting part about this myriad of things that we're involved with right now is that it gives us, I think, the opportunity to kind of learn from conversations that are happening in other spaces.
Yep.
So Mr. Thornton will know, at the Finance Committee meeting of the Central Virginia Transportation Authority last week, there was discussion about an RFP that we'll be releasing there and how to design the solicitation process in such a way that it's inclusive. And so I think that also, just to put it out to the committee in a proactive way, that's on my mind. And, I think we want to make sure that the language isn't just clear about our short, middle, and long-term objectives and sort of the deliverables that we expect through this engagement, but I think we want to practice this new approach to inclusion and engagement in the RFP process.
Yeah,
So we have one of our staff interns doing some research on how other communities have, sort of evolved their solicitation processes, and that'll also be, I think, a very intentional part of making sure that we give firms an ample amount of time, an appropriate amount of time to respond and, do research. And it may be that we build in a couple of other sort of discovery pieces along that solicitation process to be able to really make sure that we select the right vendors. So it's to be determined, but I think we want to try to practice that behavior with this process.
Well, I think it's going to be important for you then, as we're drafting it and articulating how we're going to advertise it and solicit proposals, you might need to send those two together. Because reading the content of it is relatively easy. That's a document, a deliverable that we can all respond to. How you're going to execute that would be equally important. So we have to send those two around probably together. So. Said anything else?
I think all of those strategies sound pretty good right now. I mean, like I think we mentioned before, I'm working on not just the branding of the 50th we started with, but continuing that branding of who we are, why we do what we do, and incorporating that not even just in our public outreach, but like if we're getting them to redirect them to our website for them of seeing what accomplishments or things we're working on or continuing to work on. That's pretty much what I'm thinking about doing now as well, and how we're redesigning that page so that it's more friendly to the public, so that they can just find what they need as well too. But having that strategy, I think what we did was we did pretty great in accomplishing a lot of things we wanted to with social media and public outreach in the at least the last year. And I think it's fine to continue that, but having a more long-term or having that goal of where we want to be in this time with this sort of, public outreach, I think is important. Not just, okay, well, we have this we're working on right now, let's share it. And that's in the moment, and that's great, but then we need something past that as well too.
All right, Frank, Chris, thank you very much for your time, for dialing in and for giving us your input. And we will keep you informed on when you can expect to see the RFP for you to review.
Thank you. Thank each of you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. So can you